my pleasure to introduce Sarah Browning. Sarah Browning is co-founder and executive director of Split This Rock. She is an associate fellow at the Institute for Policy Studies and a featured writer for Other Words, the IPS syndication service. The author of Whiskey in the Garden of Eden and co-editor of DC Poets Against the War, an anthology. She is the recipient of Artist Fellowships from the DC Commission on the Arts and Humanities, a Creative Communities Initiative Grant, and the People Before Prophets Poetry Prize. Sarah Browning.
In the winter of 2003, as George W. Bush was beating the drums for war, trying to get all of us to acquiesce to shock and awe, his wife, Laura Bush, was organizing a symposium in the East Wing of the White House called Poetry and the American Voice, and it was to celebrate the poetry of Langston Hughes, Walt Whitman, and Emily Dickinson. Laura Bush's office sent out invitations all over the country to poets to attend this event, and one of the poets who received it is a man named Sam Hamill, the co-founder and director for 30 years at that time of a very important poetry press called Copper Canyon. And Sam was himself a former Marine, now a pacifist and a Buddhist. He received this invitation and his stomach turned over in nausea at the prospect of visiting the White House at this time. And he sat with it for a day or two and decided it was time to revive the Poets Against the War movement that had existed during the Vietnam War. And so he sent an email invitation to 30 or 40 poets, inviting them to send him poems that spoke for peace. He wouldn't be attending the White House himself, but he said he would get them to someone who would go to the event to deliver to the First Lady. And he called for the day of the symposium, which was scheduled for February 12th, to be a day of poetry readings against the war all over the country. And indeed, of course, his email went everywhere. I received it twice or 3 times within the first couple of days. And he received, within 36 hours, 1,500 poems. It crashed the server in his small town in Washington State. Luckily, you step out of the door in Washington State and you trip over a Microsoft employee. And someone set up a database which began receiving more and more poems, and eventually 22,000 poems are in the archive of Poets Against the War, now housed at Ohio State University. I had just moved to Washington, D.C. and didn't know a single poet. I started looking for a reading to attend because I was hungry to be with other poets and to be with the animating language of poetry, the language that helps us restore meaning to language when it's being sapped of meaning by the propagandists, something we will surely see over and over again in the coming years. And when I couldn't find a reading, I decided to organize one. And so within a week of the date, I got the good folks at All Souls Unitarian Church to give us their reception hall and put out the word the best I could, tracking down poets everywhere. I made it an open mic. The church put it in their bulletin. And that night, shockingly enough, 175 people came out. 60 signed up to read. Because we only had time for 30, we immediately had a movement because we had 30 pissed off poets who didn't get a chance to read. DC Poets Against the War became the most active chapter of Poets Against the War. We organized readings and speak-outs and poets contingents to march in the national anti-war marches. We published this anthology, DC Poets Against the War. And eventually we decided it was time to do something on a larger scale, and we organized Split This Rock, which has now become a permanent home for socially engaged poets based here in Washington, D.C. at splitthisrock.org. And so one outcome of the anti-war movement has been institution building, like CODEPINK and the other essential organizations that speak the truth. Of course, I'll close with this anecdote. Laura Bush caught wind of the organizing that was happening and decided to postpone the symposium. It was never rescheduled, but her press release said that the event was threatening to become a political rather than a literary event, as if our literature did not always speak the great lament of the people the great aspirations of the people. And so I'll close with a short poem of my own, written at the second inauguration of George W. Bush. In a city of barricades, I dream of Baghdad. A man walks into a wedding and detonates lace and sweet cakes. Who imagined love was immune? One body alone has chosen this future. We choose to object cardboard coffins in our streets, but we've nothing to draw the cameras or even the cops. We make love and weep. We cannot stop. Thank you.